Chapter 18, The Girl of Flowers and the Tree of Truth. Bristol was awoken by a strong, flowery scent. Her eyes fluttered open to see what was causing the smell, but all she saw was the color yellow everywhere she looked. She waited for her eyes to adjust, expecting the color to fade or turn into something she recognized, but the yellow, and only the yellow, remained around her. Bristol was lying on something very soft, but she didn't know where she was or how she got there. She remembered the sensation of falling. She remembered how hard it was to breathe as the air rushed past her face. She remembered reaching for something descending beside her. She remembered brushing her wand with her fingertips, and she remembered how desperately she needed it. Bristol gasped and sat straight up as her full memory returned. She recalled running from the trolls and goblins with her classmates. She recalled Xanthus dropping his muter metal as they crossed the rope bridge, and worst of all, she recalled plunging toward the canyon's rocky floor. However, she hadn't landed on the hard ground as she had feared. Bristol's fall had been broken by an enormous yellow rose. As Bristol got to her feet and peeked over the massive petals, she discovered she was in the middle of an enchanted garden. Everywhere she turned, Bristol saw flowers, mushrooms, shrubbery, and other plants that were the size of houses. Her classmates were scattered around the garden, and thankfully their falls had been broken by giant flowers, too. And just like Bristol, the impact had knocked all of them unconscious. Emeralda was nested inside a towering purple tulip, and Lucy was draped over the side of a gigantic pink lily. Xanthus was lying in a huge red carnation that was partially singed now, thanks to the boys' flames. Tangerina and Skylene were still tangled in the troll's net, but the girls had landed safely on a sunflower. "Is everyone alive?" Bristol called to them. One by one, her classmates started to groan and slowly came to. They rubbed their heads, stretched their limbs, and looked around the garden in amazement. "Well, this isn't the worst place I've woken up in," Lucy said. "Where are we?" Emeralda asked. "A big garden of some kind," Bristol said. "But how'd we get here?" Xanthus asked. Everyone looked up and saw that the canyon was still above them. But strangely, the garden was underneath the canyon's rocky floor, and it covered them like a transparent roof. "The bottom of the canyon must have been a magic barrier," Tangerina speculated. "It's just like the hedge around our academy. We must have fallen into another magical residence." The classmates carefully climbed down from their giant flowers and took in their bizarre surroundings. Xanthus found his muter metal dangling off a daisy and immediately put it back around his neck. Bristol searched the garden for her wand and found it at the base of a milkweed plant. She waved the wand at Tangerina and Skylene. The net around them dissolved into thin air, and the girls joined the others on the ground. "You could have done that before you dragged us through the woods," Skylene said. "Sorry," Bristol said. "I'm still getting used to these life and death situations." The students and apprentices searched for a way out of the garden, but they couldn't find an exit anywhere. They followed a dirt path snaking through the enchanted plants, but the property seemed endless. As they walked, Tangerina's bumblebees buzzed with excitement about all the giant flowers around them. They merrily made trips to and from the enlarged blossoms, returning to Tangerina's beehive with more nectar than they knew what to do with. Eventually, the classmates heard someone humming in the garden nearby. They rounded the corner and found a 6-year-old girl watering normal-sized poppies. The girl had ringlets of bright red hair, and she wore a sundress made from large red rose petals. She hummed a cheerful tune to the poppies while she watered them, and after she was finished, she set her pail aside and twirled her fingers through the air above the flowers. The poppies started to grow, stretching to the height of a tree. "Nice trick," Lucy called to her. "Do you do parties?" The little girl wasn't expecting the classmates and screamed. She dashed behind the giant poppies and hid from the visitors. Bristol felt terrible for frightening the little girl and approached her with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, we didn't mean to scare you," she said. "You have nothing to be afraid of. We're fairies just like you." We're a little lost and we're hoping someone could show us a way out of, well, wherever we are. I'm not allowed to talk to strangers, the little girl said. Then let's fix that, she said. My name is Bristol Evergreen. These are my friends Lucy Gousset, Emeralda Stone, Xanthus Hayfield, Tangerina Turkin, and Skylene Lavenders. What's your name? Bristol's friendly charm won the little girl over, and she stepped out from behind the poppies. My name is Rosette, she said. Rosette Meadows. It's nice to meet you, Rosette, Bristol said. Now that we're better acquainted, can you please tell us where we are? You're in Greenhouse Canyon, she said. It's the world's largest botanical garden and nursery for magically enchanted plants. Do you grow all the plants yourself? Bristol asked. It's my family specialty, Rosette said. The Meadowses have the greenest thumbs in the magical community. Our thumbs aren't actually green, of course. That's just a figure of speech. Although my uncle's thumb did turn green once, but that was just a bad infection. Boy, I sure miss him. Wait, if you don't know about Greenhouse Canyon before, how'd you end up here? Me and my friends were chased off of the cliff by trolls and goblins, Bristol said. We fell into the canyon, but luckily your flowers saved our lives. You were chased by real trolls and goblins? Rosette asked with large eyes. That's amazing. I've never seen a troll or goblin in real life before. This one time, I thought I saw one, but it was just an anteater. Wait, did you say our flowers saved your life? Wow, that's incredible. My family should use that for marketing. I can picture the advertisements now. Meadows flowers. Not only are they beautiful, they're life-saving. It's tough getting new customers when your location is a secret. Oh, I imagine that's a tough way to sell. Our usual customers are all old and smell like cheese. Why do you think that is? You guys are the youngest people I've ever seen in the canyon. I rarely have anyone my own age to talk to. Gosh, this is nice. Is this nice for you too? I spend a lot of time with plants. They say talking to plants helps them grow. I'm not sure it's the healthiest thing for me, though. Plants are good listeners, I guess, but it's not the same as talking to people. Sometimes you just need to hear something besides your own voice. You know what I mean? Hey, do you guys want to tour the gardens while you're here? Obviously, Rosette was very excited to have company, but she talked so fast the others were having a hard time understanding her. We'd love to stay, but we're in a bit of a hurry, Bristol said. Would you mind showing us how to get back to the in-between? Rosette looked around the gardens curiously and scratched her head. Actually, I'm not sure how to get out of here, she said. Believe it or not, I've never been outside the canyon before. My family is very protective. Did you know the world is full of people who want to harm us? It was news to me. My family also says I'm a lot for other people to handle. They say I'm best in small doses, whatever that means. It doesn't hurt my feelings, though. Everyone expresses love in a different language. Do you guys know what your love languages are? Mine is quality time. It used to be physical touch, but that wasn't working very well, so I had to change it. People are so picky around personal space, and is there someone else we could talk to? Lucy interrupted. You'll have to speak to sorceress, Rosette said. She'll know a way out. Did you say the sorceress? Emeralda asked. Yeah, she's my aunt, Rosette said. Come with me. I'll show you where she is. The classmates followed the little girl through the gardens, and along the way, Rosette gave them the tour they didn't want. She spoke in great detail about every flower and plant they passed. Bristol suspected she was purposely taking the long way through the garden so she had more time to talk to them. Soon they passed a bundle of bushes with colorful berries that caught Xanthus's eye. I recognize those, he said. Madame Weatherberry had them in her golden carriage. Those are our meal berries, Rosette said. They're one of our best sellers. They grow different types of food depending on what time of day it is. What's that over there? Skylene asked. Oh, that's our orchard of objects, she said. Come on, you'll definitely want to see it. Rosette skipped toward the orchard and gestured for the others to follow her. Lucy shot her classmates a scathing look as they went. "Stop asking her questions," she whispered. "She's slow enough as it is." The little girl showed them an acre of trees planted in very straight rows. All the trees in the orchard were identical, but instead of fruit or flowers, each tree grew a different household object. There were trees with bars of soap, buckets and mops, pillows and blankets, candles and candlesticks, tables and chairs, spatulas and frying pans, brushes and combs, shoes and socks, and even trees that sprouted stuffed animals. "My family can grow just about anything on trees," Rosette boasted. "We get requests from witches and fairies all over the world. Money is always what people want the most. That probably isn't a surprise, though. Before you ask, the answer is no. We don't grow money trees, at least not anymore. The last time we sold one, the Western Kingdom had an economic crisis." "They still haven't recovered from the—" "Rosette, how much farther until we reach the sorceress?" Lucy asked. "We're in a bit of a crisis of our own." "We're almost there," Rosette said. "Our house is just beyond the vineyard of vices and the farm of fragrances. I can't wait to show you those." Eventually, the tour ended at a large 4-story manor. The home was constructed entirely out of vines, and it had a spiral roof of twisted thorn bush. Inside, the manor had a thatched floor and walls made from colorful shrubbery. As Rosette escorted her guests through the home, the classmates heard the sounds of several different creatures coming from somewhere inside the house. When they stepped into the great room, Bristol and her friends discovered a zoo of potted plants that looked, moved, and roared like animals. There were barking dogwood blossoms, meowing catnip plants, screeching monkey face orchids, and flapping bird of paradise flowers. In the very back of the great room, an old woman was feeding a crate of live chickens to a massive bouquet of Venus flytraps. The plants caught the birds with their snapping jaws and swallowed them whole. It was an unnerving scene to walk in on, and the classmates froze halfway through the room. But Rosette happily skipped up to the old woman without hesitation. "Auntie Floraline, we have visitors," she announced. Floraline Meadows was a very short woman with a wide mouth and abnormally long earlobes. She had 2 braids of silver hair and wore a smock made from autumn leaves. To the Venus flytrap's dismay, the old woman put a lid over the chicken crate and took a break from the feeding to meet her guests. "Auntie Floraline, these are my new friends, Bristol, Lucy, Emeralda, Xanthus, Tangerina, and Skyline," Rosette introduced. "New friends, this is my aunt, Sorceress Floraline Meadows." The sorceress studied the classmates with very untrusting eyes. "Are you customers?" she asked them. "No," Bristol said. "Are you solicitors?" "No." "Then what are you doing in my canyon?" "We're here by accident," Bristol explained. "A tribe of trolls and a colony of goblins chased us off the cliff. We don't want to disturb you, but we really appreciate it if you could tell us how do we get out of here." The sorceress was still suspicious and raised an eyebrow at the classmates. "You're awfully young to be in the in-between by yourselves," she said. "Where are you coming from?" "Madam Weatherbury's Academy of Magic," Skyline said. "Huh. Sounds fancy," the old woman said. "I didn't know there were academies for people like us." "It's the first of its kind," Skyline said, and beamed with pride. "Well, la-dee-da," the sorceress sang. "To leave the canyon, go to the northwest corner of the gardens and make a left turn at the grove of glassware. You'll find a ladder that leads back to the in-between." "Thank you," Bristol said. "We'll be on our way. It was nice meeting you." "Thanks for dropping by," Rosette said. No pun intended. The classmates headed for the door, but when Bristol turned back to wave goodbye, she noticed that Tangerina hadn't moved. The apprentice was inquisitively looking back and forth between the sorceress and the bouquet of Venus flytraps. "Just out of curiosity," Tangerina said, "when you said people like us, what were you referring to? Do sorceresses practice magic or witchcraft?" Magic for the most part, the old woman said, but I've been known to be a bit of a witch from time to time. It just depends on what kind of a mood I'm in. The sorceress laughed at her own joke, but the students and apprentices didn't understand why it was funny. On the contrary, the remark only confused them. "You're not being serious, are you?" Tangerina asked. "Of course I'm being serious," the old woman said. "I didn't get these ears from sticking to magic over the years. I don't use it often, but occasionally a little witchcraft goes a long way." "But that isn't possible," Tangerina said. "You're born either a fairy or a witch. No one gets to choose." The sorceress was stunned by Tangerina's assertion. "Young lady, what on earth are you talking about?" she asked. "Having magical abilities isn't a choice, but no one in the magical community is born a fairy or a witch. We all get to be whatever we want, whenever we want. Personally, I've never identified as one or the other. That's why I call myself a sorceress." That, that, that's not true, Tangerina argued. "Fairies are born with goodness in their hearts and therefore can only practice magic. Witches are born with wickedness in their hearts and therefore can only practice witchcraft." "And who taught you that nonsense?" the sorceress asked. "Our teacher did," Tangerina said. "Well, I hate to break it to you, but your teacher is wrong," the old woman said. "Nothing in this universe is black and white. Even the darkest nights have a degree of light, and the brightest days have a pinch of darkness. The world is full of duality, and we get to choose where we stand in all of it." The sorceress was very persuasive as she stated her case, but the classmates couldn't accept it. If she was telling them the truth, then everything they knew about magic and the very foundation of Madame Weatherbury's academy was all a lie. "No, I don't believe you," Skylene objected. "Madame Weatherbury would never lie to us. You're clearly a witch because you're trying to trick us." "Look, you can believe whatever you want to believe, but I'm not trying to trick anyone," the sorceress said. "Here, I'll prove it to you." The old woman pointed to the ground, and a large flower grew out of the thatched floor. It was the most gorgeous plant the classmates had ever seen, and its rosy petals were so vibrant the flower practically glowed. After the children had a chance to admire it and fall in love with its beauty, the sorceress clenched her fist and the flower began to wither. Its color faded, its petals broke away, its stem weakened, and the plant decayed into a mound of dirt. "See," the old woman said, "magic and witchcraft." The demonstration was quick and simple, but it proved the sorceress was correct. Bristol and her classmates were distressed as they stared at the flower's remains. Their minds were racing as they reevaluated everything Madame Weatherbury had ever said. "But why did she lie about it?" Bristol asked. "Why would Madame Weatherbury act like fairies and witches were different species if it was just a preference?" "We could ask our tree of truth," Rosette suggested. "A tree of truth," Lucy said. "Okay, now you're just yanking our tail feathers." "No, it's real," Rosette said. "The tree of truth is a magic tree that produces honesty. It may answer your questions about your teacher. There's only one left in Greenhouse Canyon. We had to stop selling them because they were driving our customers mad." "Is it safe?" Bristol asked. "As long as you can handle the truth," the sorceress said. "Most people can't." Bristol wasn't confident she could either. Learning that Madame Weatherbury had lied about something so significant was crushing enough, but Bristol would be devastated if she discovered the fairy had lied for dishonorable reasons. However, nothing seemed more daunting than another unanswered question, so Bristol welcomed the opportunity to find the truth. "All right," she said. "Take me to the tree." Rosette and the sorceress escorted their guests to the opposite side of the greenhouse canyon. At the end of the dirt path, at the top of a tiny hill, was a small white tree. At first, the tree of truth looked very normal, but as the classmates walked closer, they noticed its bark was covered in carvings of human eyes. Bristol cautiously climbed the hill and stood before the tree, but she didn't know what to do next. "How does this work?" she asked. "Take one of its branches into the palm of your hand," the sorceress instructed. "Then close your eyes, clear your head, and ask it the questions on your mind." Bristol took a deep breath and held a branch. As soon as her hand closed around it, Bristol was transported far away from Greenhouse Canyon. She wasn't standing on a hill in the middle of the gardens anymore, but on a hill that floated miles above the ground. The clouds flowed beneath her like a rushing river, and the stars twinkled so clearly above her that they seemed within reach. When she looked back at the tree of truth, the carvings on its trunk and branches suddenly opened and became real human eyes, and every single one was staring directly at her. Bristol assumed it was all in her mind, but that didn't make it feel any less real. "Do you have a question?" said a deep voice that echoed through the sky around her. "That depends," Bristol said. "Do you really give honest answers?" "I cannot predict the future or read someone's thoughts, but I know all that is and all that was," the voice responded. Bristol still had doubts about the tree of truth, so she started with a few simple questions to test the tree's authenticity. "Where was I born?" she asked. "Chariot Hills," the voice answered. "And where did I attend school?" "The Chariot Hills School for Future Wives and Mothers." "What does my mother do for a living?" "Everything your father doesn't." The last question had been a trick question, but Bristol was impressed by how the tree had answered it. She decided not to waste any more time testing its accuracy and skipped to the questions she was there for. "Is it true that all members of the magical community are born the same, and that being a fairy or a witch is just a preference?" Bristol asked. "Yes," the tree said. "Then why did Madame Weatherberry lie to us?" she asked. "The same reason everyone lies," the tree said, "to hide the truth." "But why did she need to hide it? Why does Madame Weatherberry want us to believe there is a difference between fairies and witches if there isn't?" "I cannot see her exact motivation, but I can give insight on why others tell similar lies," the tree offered. "Why?" Bristol asked. "When faced with discrimination, it is common for people to divide their communities into their oppressors' definitions of right and wrong. By categorizing fairies as good and witches as bad, it's possible that Madame Weatherberry was trying to gain acceptance for fairies by fueling hatred for witches." The theory made sense, but if the tree was right, that meant Madame Weatherberry was encouraging humankind to hate and harm members of her own community, and Bristol couldn't imagine Madame Weatherberry wishing hate or harm on anyone. So is that the real reason she published The Truth About Magic? Are the incantations supposed to help humankind discover and persecute witches? "The incantation for witchcraft is fake," the tree said. "The incantation for magic is the only genuine spell in her book." The revelation puzzled Bristol even more. She was starting to think the Tree of Truth should be called the Tree of Frustration because everything it said made the situation more complicated. Her mind was spiraling into different directions, but as Bristol concentrated on the facts, it slowly dawned on her why Madame Weatherberry had done what she did. "I think I understand now," Bristol said. "If Madame Weatherberry convinced humankind to only discriminate against witches and convinced everyone in the magical community that they were fairies, it would save everyone. She pretended the community was divided to protect it from humankind, while still giving humankind something to hate and fear, right?" "Noble people usually lie for noble reasons," the voice said. "Sadly, you'll never know until you ask them yourself." "How is Madame Weatherberry doing now? Is she alive?" "Your teacher is still alive, but she's been taken hostage by an evil energy," the Tree of Truth said. Very little of Madame Weatherbury remains, and the life that she clings to is being drained by her captor. It won't be long until she loses the fight. She's been captured? Bristol asked in a panic. Where is she being kept? Do we have time to save her? Madame Weatherbury is imprisoned deep within Tinsel Palace in the Northern Kingdom's capital. However, if you continue down the winding paths of the in-between, the chances of rescuing her are unlikely. Is there a faster way to get there? 10 miles north of Greenhouse Canyon in the back of Black Bear Cave, you'll find the entrance to an abandoned goblin tunnel. Take the tunnel, and you'll arrive in Tinsel Heights in half the time. All right, we will, Bristol said. Thank you. Bristol released the Tree of Truth's branch from her grip and returned to the garden in Greenhouse Canyon. The trip back felt like she was falling to the earth all over again, and she screamed, causing all her classmates to jump. Did something bite you? Xanthus asked. Sorry, Bristol said. I wasn't expecting the trip back to be so jarring. What do you mean, trip back? Emeralda asked. It doesn't matter. I got the answers we wanted, Bristol said. Madame Weatherbury did lie to us about magic and witchcraft, but she was only doing it to protect the magical community. I'll explain it all later because we have to go. If we don't leave Greenhouse Canyon right now, we'll never see Madame Weatherbury again.